tool for succession planning, because we know they're going to have the sum of money when they need it, whether that's for the purchase of the business and the buy-sell, whether it's for estate liquidity because we're passing the business by will or trust down to the next generation. Whatever we're doing, life insurance plays an extremely important role, and people aren't using it. They aren't using it because they don't know how, or they don't know why is probably a better comment. On any given day, 1.7 million businesses nationwide are for sale, and 65% of small business owners are going to transition out in the next 10 years. This was according to PricewaterhouseCoopers back in 2006. I bet some folks had to probably delay that transition for a little while because of the market. But I bet those people would love to get out now. So what do? The Succession Consulting Group is actually our advanced markets area. So we've been doing succession consulting all the time. And why do we call it the Succession Consulting Group? One, it's a nice little marketing spin. But number two, we tried to create this package that you guys can take out and use. And that's not something that is going to be so impossible, such a Herculean task that we can't get it done over the next year or so. So we wanted to give you the process and the tools. So you've got the tools. Mark handed out the brochures inside of that folder. They're all very nice. But without the process, without knowing how to move through this, they really aren't going to do you much good. So that's what we're going to do today. All right, when you give us a fully completed fact finder, we're going to analyze, evaluate, and recommend. And I put that in there because I want to make sure that we understand without the fact finder, we're nowhere. We can't, sometimes in advanced markets, people will say, I have a client with a $2.5 million estate, can you help me do an estate analysis? And you'll grudgingly say, well, you know, if it grows at 6%, then their estate tax liability will be X in a certain number of years. That you can do in estate planning, I suppose. We can't come up with any recommendations without a good fact finder and succession consulting group. So I really encourage you, we have a fact finder in there. Please, please, please use that if you want us to be able to help you with these. All right, so what does this really mean? Analyze, recommend. We want to talk about some of the considerations prior to transition and preparing the business for transition. One of the greatest services that you guys can provide, especially when we're talking about transferring a business to insiders, is to help these business owners understand that they need to mentor. They need to bring along the next generation, right? Because if they aren't bringing along the next generation, eventually the next generation is going to get it, and they're going to make mistakes, they're going to screw things up. The only thing you can do is be there while they're making those mistakes. So start the mentoring process while you're alive. There isn't a sale within 100 miles of that value-added piece of advice, but it is the best advice you're going to get. If they want that business to succeed in the next generation, they absolutely have to teach the next generation how to run the business. So we talk about that a fair bit. What are some other considerations? Well, if they're a corporation, should they make an S election? If they're thinking about perhaps expanding their lines of business, maybe they better think twice about that. Small business owners, many of them became successful because they are aggressive, because they can control things, right? So when we're talking about mentoring, when we're talking about expanding the business, taking on new debt, somebody needs to say, you better at least think about whether that's a good idea. Because if things go south on this expansion and you want out in 10 years, you may have taken your retirement vehicle and flushed it down the toilet, right? Because that is the type of thing that people need to hear and understand. We'll talk about the exit strategy itself. How might you structure a sale? Especially if we're talking about family members. Especially because you know, how do kids save for the purchase of their parents' business? They don't, do they? And they don't. I love it. I have people call me all the time and they say, gosh, what if we did an executive bonus for the kids? And I said, you know what? I think that's great. If you bonus them money, then I think that's a great employee benefit for your kids. But if you're making that recommendation because you think the kids are going to save that money, then you're just barking up the wrong tree. They never do. They never do. If you give the kids more money, they'll spend more money. They'll join the country club, they'll buy a nicer car, bigger house, something. So we need to talk about, well, eventually you're probably going to have to structure that as some sort of installment sale, right? And so maybe you start to prepare the kids. Maybe we start to do things like set up a defined benefit plan, a non-qualified deferred comp plan for you so that you have money outside of the business. Maybe we talk about separating your lines of business. This is what I think is the second best piece of advice to come out of this. If you have a business that you want to transition to the next generation, but you're scared that the next generation is going to run it into the ground and you won't have anything to take back, why not separate lines of business? Why not separate the real estate from the operating business? If you did that, if you maintained ownership of the land, for example, and leased it to the operating business that you sold to the kids, then if the kids actually run the business into the ground, at least you have the land left over, right? So really, it's impossible to even describe the universe of possibilities that are out there. But those are some of the great value-added ideas. I did want to mention gifting and bequest strategies because there are some great opportunities right now. As you guys know, there's new tax law, and we can now give away $5 million, or you can die within $5 million if you have the courtesy to do that in the next 2 years, right? So that's, a lot of small business owners are going to fall into that range. Especially if they're married, because that's $10 million, and that handles a lot of the small businesses out there, and a lot of the estates out there. So there's those options. But even if you have a business that's larger, what great opportunities to talk about family limited partnerships, to talk about grantor retained annuity trusts. Because right now, grants are one, they're always wonderful tools, but they've been in the sort of in the crosshairs in Washington for the last year or so. If you want to do a grant, there's a very real possibility starting soon that you may have to do 10-year grants instead of 2-year rolling grants, which is very popular. Okay? We know that the 75-20 rate right now is 2.8%, which is historically very low, but it might be on the upswing. So we may have a rising interest rate environment. So grants right now might be a wonderful opportunity to pass property to the next generation with a discounted value, if you will. So we discuss those things as well. Some ESOPs, flips, grants, charitable transfers. Here's what I'm really proud of, the emotional and family issues. Because again, I think you can go a lot of places and have them tell you that you could do a sale to an intentionally defective grantor trust. But what we want to focus on is we want to help you provide a more holistic approach. We want you to go out equipped with this idea that people can't just walk away from their businesses in many cases, right? There's a great story, a guy I work with. I worked for a small insurance company that was a mutual company. They demutualized, and as happens in this industry now, it was bought and sold several times. He runs into his former CEO, and his former CEO, when they were bought out, was retired. And he said, so how do you like retirement? And he said, well, Dave, let me tell you. He said, never plan a haircut and a trip to the hardware store on the same day because you got nothing left to do the rest of the week. And we see that happen with small business owners all the time, right? They get home, they take those wonderful managerial skills and take them home to their spouse, right? So, I know you've been doing that for 40 years, but I think I have a better way. That's very popular. I don't know how that would work for you.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, see? But Mark knows that, so that's good. But those are the things that you really have to consider. Say, are you prepared for retirement? One of the great things about our industry, I think that